For the beginning of June, I thought it would be good to do a tour of the allotment. If you like this video, please let me know by thumbs up or liking it. Don't forget to subscribe by hitting the subscribe button, and also click the bell to make sure you're notified every time a new video is added. So starting with inside the polytunnel, at the bottom there is a cucumber plant, the youngest cucumber plant inside the polytunnel. I actually had trouble germinating my cucumber this year. I think I was trying to germinate them in too cold an environment. So they're probably around a month behind where I'd like them to be. So in the next 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully I'll have the first cucumber off them. The tomato plants are looking more ugly than I'd like them to be because it's been so hot inside the polytunnel here. But there are plenty of flowers on the tomato plants, and the tomatoes are actually starting to form. So perhaps by the end of June I can have the first tomatoes. So starting the tour of the allotment, directly outside the polytunnel I have my fruit, starting with a line of raspberries. Now the raspberries I really struggle with down here because the soil is so sandy, and I also have problems with bindweed and couch grass. But this year has been one of the best years for the raspberries because I've been able to come down here more often, clear the weeds away, and these are summer fruiting raspberries, and the new canes, which won't actually provide their fruit until next year, are growing nicely. But some of the old canes that did survive last year are in fruit, and if I can just zoom in here, the fruit is forming nicely. So perhaps in the next month I can be harvesting the summer fruiting raspberries. Now in the raspberry canes there are plenty of gaps, and what I've tried to do is to fill in the gaps with other plants. So this is a winter squash called Crown Prince, and I hope it will spread over the whole area here, which are the paths in between the lines of fruit bushes. Now fruit bushes need quite big gaps in between them, so this path is almost 2 meters wide, and I've got a similar sized path between the line of raspberries and the start of the polytunnel. So the plant has got ample opportunity to spread out and hopefully produce lots of fruit. Towards the end of the line of raspberries I have more autumn fruiting varieties. I'm actually not sure if this is a raspberry, it could actually be a blackberry or a bramble, but I'll just see what happens. They should produce fruits either way. And I've also planted runner beans. Now the runner beans will grow up the same frame that I put up for the raspberries. I may actually need to extend the height of the frame because to take full advantage of the growth of the runner beans. But what's quite exciting at the moment is that the first flowers are forming on the let's see if I can get the camera to focus on that. So the first flowers are forming on the runner beans. I've put 2 pots in the gap between the raspberries and the hybrid fruit. So the first is horseradish. So horseradish has survived 3 or 4 years now, but I've never really grown the thick roots that are used to make horseradish sauce. So I've positioned them in the shade, which I hope will mean that the roots will grow bigger. I've also got a pot full of comfrey. One of the great things about comfrey, it produces these beautiful flowers, which I think is the main reason actually to grow comfrey for the display. But I'll put some of the leaves in the compost bin. Starting with the hybrid berries, this is a boysenberry. This is the first year of planting of the boysenberry. It's growing nicely. It's not very tall at the moment, it's probably only 1.5 foot high, but it's produced plenty of flowers and it has fruit forming. So at least this year I hope to have some fruit off it to see whether it's good for eating fresh or best for cooking. Next to that I have this loganberry plant. Loganberries I found to be a little inferior actually to the tayberry plant next to it. But this year I've been watering the loganberry plant much more frequently, and I hope that will make a difference to the size and juiciness of the fruit. The plant has actually got plenty of fruit on it, so it should be a good harvest this year. And if the fruit improves, I will keep the plant, and if it doesn't improve, I may think about making a different use of the space, either by taking a cutting off the tayberry plant there, or even by allowing the boysenberry plant to expand over the space. The tayberry plant is one of my favourite crops I grow down on the allotment. It's really vigorous. For some reason birds leave it alone, which I don't understand, because the fruit is really juicy and delicious, but probably not quite as flavourful or as tasty as raspberries eating fresh, but it's great for jams and hot desserts. The fruit are twice the size of an average size raspberry, and you can see the plant is absolutely covered in fruits and full of leaf. I have been tying back the canes, so this is this year's growth, that I've just grouped all the canes together, tied them around wire and supported them to the frame. If I weren't to do that, the canes would spread all over the plot, which will block the light for other plants, run the risk of me stepping on them and breaking the canes. So what I'll do at the end of summer, I'll cut away the canes that are fruited this year and then train the new canes into a fan shape ready for next year. Next to the row of the hybrid berries, I have my fruit cage. Inside the fruit cage I've got gooseberries, blackcurrants, redcurrants, and then more gooseberries. So I'll take a look inside the fruit cage and show you the fruit that's forming. So the fruit cage is keeping the squirrels and birds off the bushes. If I weren't to do that, all the fruit would go. They absolutely love the fruit, which is unfortunate because I do too. But you can see that the branches are full of small fruit. I actually don't know how long it will take to mature to harvest. I'm hoping within 4 weeks, but it may take slightly longer. And gooseberries are worth waiting for, I find, because eating them too young and they'll taste sour, but allowed to ripen to their full sweetness, they're actually one of my favourite fruit to eat fresh. The same goes for blackcurrants. So the blackcurrant bushes have plenty of fruits on them, but they're at least another 4 weeks away, possibly 6. They keep quite well on the branches, even when they're ripe. And as I say, the flavour's much better when they are ripe. So I will allow them to mature fully. Next to the blackcurrants, I have a redcurrant bush. Now, some of the redcurrants are actually starting to change colour. Let me see if I can just zoom in there. So this redcurrant bush actually, I think, needs a little bit of love. It's growing more horizontally than in a goblet shape, so I will try and support this. But next year I'll try and work on it to make sure it can retain its goblet shape and stop blocking the light for the gooseberry bush, which is next to it. So if I pull back these branches here, you can see the gooseberry bush which is next to it. So this gooseberry bush unfortunately has had quite a lot of light blocked by the rambling redcurrant bush, but as with the other gooseberry bush, there is plenty of fruit forming on it. And then I have this huge gooseberry bush at the end here, which again is growing really vigorously, and it's absolutely covered with fruit. So as I say, within the next 4 to 6 weeks there should be a harvest coming from this bush. Outside the fruit cage I have an apple tree that I planted this year. I'm actually really pleased with how well it's doing. It's formed fruit. I don't know whether the fruit will go on to mature to have the first apples from it, but it's a good sign of health. And at the base of the tree I've applied a mulch to help keep the moisture in the soil. I give the tree a good watering every couple of weeks, actually once a week at the moment because the weather's been so hot, which I hope will allow the roots to mature. So next year it will probably need a lot less attention. And around the tree I've planted another winter squash, which I hope will expand over all this area here. Because the shops have been closed, I haven't been able to buy the mulch that I intend to put down to cover this area. So the expanding squash plant will be a big help if it does that, apart from the fruit, to help keep the fabric in good condition. The squash plant itself is starting to throw out runners, which is a good sign that it's happy where it is, and thankfully it hasn't been attacked by slugs and snails. I like to put out squash plants when they're nice and big, because I find they get because I find they're a lot less susceptible to damage that way. And I've been watering this plant once a day in the hot weather to give the roots plenty of moisture to encourage it to grow quickly. I grow all my vegetables in beds because I find this makes it easier to concentrate on growing vegetables rather than weeding, and has saved me much more time than just keeping the ground open. The potatoes here I've earthed up. These are the potatoes I planted earliest in the year, and this bed is actually half and half. At the end of the bed I have a rhubarb plant, which again is freshly planted this year, and the intention is to allow the rhubarb plant to expand over as much of the bed as it likes. So I just took the opportunity to sow a few potatoes whilst the rhubarb plant is relatively young. And I've done the same thing here with a couple of dahlia plants at the end, which are growing nicely. They were damaged a little by frost. They produced these gorgeous red-orange flowers in a kind of star shape. And I hope to share photographs of that later on in the summer. The strawberry bed is heavily protected with netting. I find if I don't do that, the fruit will be taken either by birds or squirrels. If I just pan round here, you can see how close the trees are to the polytunnel. And there's one squirrel in particular that looks exceptionally fit. I think the squirrel has one of the best diets in the country because of all the produce it steals from the plots here. And what I've done for the strawberries is I've actually screwed in some insect netting and put this underneath the weed control fabric to stop anything being able to enter the beds from underneath. Next to the strawberries I have a couple of rows of potato plants. This row here needs to be earthed up. One of the reasons they haven't been earthed up is that these potatoes haven't grown evenly, so a couple of the potatoes came through relatively late compared to the other plants. So I've earthed up the bigger plants, and I'm still waiting for the smaller plants growing in between to get a little larger before I earth up the whole row. My shallot bed I think is looking really good at the moment. I've been watering the shallots quite a lot, maybe a couple of times a week, because the weather has been so hot and I've got this dry soil. They're producing plenty of leaves, which I hope will mean that lots of bulbs are forming beneath the soil. Probably another couple of months until they're ready to harvest. The garlic though should be ready to harvest much sooner than that. I planted the garlic in early October, and some of the stems of the garlic plants are looking really nice and thick, which I hope will mean that the bulbs are a good size below. I planted the garlic through this weed control film, which helps retain the moisture and also keep the weeds down, because on this area of the plot I've got some perennial weeds that are just so hard to control, so growing them through weed control fabric really reduces the amount of weeding that I need to do. Next to the garlic I have my broad beans. These broad beans are really coming into pod right now. I harvested the first pods about 5 days ago. They were still a little difficult to pull off the plants, so I'm just going to allow them another week or two to really swell in size to make sure that the beans are fully formed and to avoid damaging the plants when I start to harvest them fully. Moving on from the broad beans, I then have the parsnip bed. I say the parsnip bed, this is where I've sown the parsnips, but something got to the parsnips. I think most probably a slug, but possibly a snail. and I now regularly check underneath the weed control fabric to make sure that nothing is hiding underneath. So I've re-sown this row with fresh parsnip seed, and I'm watering it regularly. You can see that that there are a few parsnip plants, so I haven't lost the entire crop, but just nothing like the amount of parsnip seed I planted. And then in between the parsnip seed, I planted a row of radish, and the radish was entirely eaten. So I've replanted some beetroot, and the beetroot is now starting to come through. One of the things I've also changed, apart from looking for more slugs and snails that may be eating the crop, is I've removed the net, which hopefully will mean that birds come along and help me control whatever's eating the crops in this bed. At the far side, I have some chard. So the chard again has been attacked, but hopefully as the plants grow bigger that will be less of a problem. And I also have some beetroot growing at the end there. Next to this bed I've got some more beets. So this is New Zealand spinach, which is really starting to mature now. Now, New Zealand spinach, when I've grown it previously, ends up being a really big plant. So I hope that the whole of this area here over the next few weeks will start to be dominated by the spinach plant, and hopefully the spinach will get away before anything starts to eat it. Then I have some more chard, and two rows of chard, some younger chard and some older plants. And then on the far side there I have some beetroot coming through. Next to this bed I have 3 kale plants. One has almost been totally eaten by either a slug or a snail, but the other 2 plants thankfully have been less affected. I've been playing hide and seek with the slug and snail here, so I've lifted up the fabric, tried to find it, but I haven't been successful in doing so. At the end of the bed I plan to plant some cauliflower that I have at home, and possibly some cabbage too. Next to these 2 beds are a couple more beds of potatoes. These 2 beds of potatoes were quite badly affected by a late frost in May, but they've recovered nicely, and I think I've probably only lost a couple of weeks in terms of growing time, and hopefully nothing at all in terms of size of harvest. So I've been pleasantly surprised actually with how well the potatoes have recovered. The final crop to show are the blueberry plants. So the blueberries are quite mature plants. I've had them here 5-6 years now, and they're actually covered. If I stand back here, the supports around them are the upside down legs of a trampoline we used to have in the garden, which has made an excellent frame to hang the net off. I'm using butterfly net to protect the plants. One of the things I should say is that I only put the butterfly net on after the fruit has started to form. So when the plants are in flower, there's no net on, so the pollinating insects can do their work. But the plants are looking really good this year. I've been watering them once a week with quite a large amount of water, because blueberries like to keep their feet in moist conditions. I'll show you the fruit that's forming. So around the base of the blueberry plants I secure the net with bricks. This is important to keep the birds out. Birds love to get underneath the nets and to start eating the fruit. So this is the fruit that is forming on the blueberry plants. They're really good size, so I'm quite excited. I think it's only another 4 weeks, perhaps less than that, until these are ready to be harvested. So that's the tour of the allotment. Just to recap, these are the blueberries, the potatoes, the brassicas with the chard and the New Zealand spinach behind, the broad beans and the parsnip bed. Then there's the garlic and the shallots behind them. another couple of beds full of potatoes. At the back there is the squash plant and the apple tree with the strawberry bed. Then the rhubarb bed, which has some potatoes and a couple of dahlia plants in it. A fruit cage that is full of gooseberries, blackcurrants, redcurrants and more gooseberries. A row of tayberries, loganberries, and at the back there boysenberry, with a couple of pot plants, one of comfrey and another of horseradish, and then a row which I call the raspberry row, but actually has raspberries in it, runner beans, a winter squash, and at the end here, summer fruiting raspberries. These are next to the polytunnel, and in front of the polytunnel is this global artichoke plant, which is now well past its peak and grows to this most enormous size. And the reason I leave it is that at the top here it produces these amazing flowers, a spectacular display of purple flowers. But maybe this is its last year. I'll cut it away completely and use the space for something else.